Sorry.
No fear. No political correctness. No wokeism. You're listening to Underground USA.
Thanks for downloading and listening and sharing. My name is Frank Salvato, and you're spending a few moments in Underground USA. If you thought the 2024 general election was going to be predicated on how radical or unintelligent Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are, you're only considering the lesser of the things that the Democrat presidential ticket has going for it. Understanding that the Biden-Harris administration has been a figurehead administration, meaning that they've been puppets trotted out in front of the cameras and microphones when they dared come out of the basement, for a more radical and ruthlessly ideological cabal of puppet masters. If you're a regular reader or listener of Underground USA, then you know I'm talking about Obama 2.0. This cabal is stepping out from the shadows to salvage what was a train wreck of a campaign for Harris and Walz, and their newest additions to the campaign team bear that out. Joining the Harris-Walz campaign are a number of Obama campaign retreads, but none more definitive than David Plouffe. Plouffe was Obama's 2008 campaign manager and, from his station as White House senior advisor in 2012, served a similar role. Incidentally, Plouffe will have to give up his advisory role to the Communist Chinese Party-linked TikTok to take this position. Other Obama campaign retreads include senior policy advisor Brian Nelson, narrative crafter Stephanie Cutter, organizing strategist Mitch Stewart, pollster Terrance Woodbury, and communications advisor Jen Palmieri, most of who had roles in Obama's campaigns or administration. Brian Fallon, who was previously the director of public affairs for Obama's Justice Department, a top aide to Chuck Schumer, and Hillary Clinton's 2016 national press secretary, will also join the Harris campaign as a senior advisor for communications. The Harris campaign is also slated to hire GMMB, the media firm headed by former Obama ad maker Jim Margolis. Nelson served in the California Department of Justice, first as Special Assistant Attorney General and then as General Counsel from 2011 to 2015. Cutter served as an advisor to Obama during his first term and was deputy campaign manager of his 2012 re-election campaign. She also worked for other prominent Democrats, including Ted Kennedy, John Kerry, and Michelle Obama. Stewart was the director of field operations in the Iowa caucuses for the Obama of America campaign and served as state director for Obama's primary campaign in Texas and Indiana. He later headed the campaign's Virginia operations. Stewart went on to serve as Battleground States Director for Obama's 2012 re-election, overseeing state strategy and programs that garnered victories in 9 of the 10 battleground states. He would go on to serve as the first director of Organizing for America, a far-left voter outreach organization. Palmieri served as Obama White House Director of Communications from 2013 to 2015 and Director of Communications for the Hillary Clinton 2016 presidential campaign. But the most significant hire is Plouffe, and the Harris-Walz Obama 2.0 team is set to give the country a good pluffing. In 2007, Plouffe was hired to run the presidential campaign of then-untested U.S. Senator Barack Obama, Democrat from Illinois, a political nobody who targeted his opponent's personal life because, in Obama's obscurity, he had accomplished nothing. During Obama's primary, Plouffe's strategy was to target low-turnout, caucus-based states with small delegate counts like Nebraska, Idaho, and North Dakota. In doing so, Plouffe amassed enough state wins for Obama to build enough momentum to defeat then heir apparent to the Democrat dynasty U.S. Senator Hillary Clinton, a Democrat from New York, or many considered a carpetbagger, to defeat her in larger states where her name recognition and political roots had the strongest impact. During the 2008 primaries, Plouffe emphasized keeping campaign strategy and communication confidential and especially avoiding any public appearance of infighting. He also greenlighted the use of information, strategy, and tactics created by the Analyst Institute. The Analyst Institute is a socio-political laboratory focusing on voter contact and engagement. It interprets data for the progressive, read Marxist, political sphere that can then be processed into recommendations to provide a pathway to strategic advantage for far-left political candidates and causes. Research information derived from these efforts is considered classified and is shared only among the groups that work with the Institute. In 2014, the Institute worked with Vote.org to craft a strategy that utilized text messages and emails to pressure participants to vote, finding that the method increased turnout, so much so that when implemented in Obama's 2012 re-election campaign, it turned the tide, catching an inept Romney campaign flat-footed. When Fox News was actually worth a shit to the ideological right, Bret Baier reported on the Analyst Institute in a segment called Prying Eyes, campaigns using your data to capture your vote. But since Rupert Murdoch handed control of News Corp to his idiot leftist sons, this exposure has been removed from their archives. Instead, we have a 2012 interview with the author of The Victory Lab, Sasha Eisenberg, who tells us how the 2012 Obama campaign used behavioral psychology and a person's online data, or as Dr. Robert Malone would term it, psyops, to target individuals to pressure and coerce them, to shame them into voting for Barack Obama.
It used to be that polling was the science of campaigns, and now there's so much more behavioral science and prediction and analytics that's going into it. When did that happen?
So in the wake of 2000, I think a lot changes. You have all sorts of new data coming from the commercial world that's making its way into politics. You have academics in political science discovering field experiments. Political science had never spent anywhere near as much time as some of the other social sciences actually testing things in the field. People realize they can run these experiments and see what actually moves voters. And we start to realize that a lot of things we see in polls or in focus groups don't really live up to the way that people experience politics in the real world.
So this combination of commercial data and political data, give me an example.
Well, for you, Hari, you're a registered voter, so right away I know on your voter registration record if you're affiliated with a party, which elections you voted in. If you vote in primaries, I know your date of birth, so I know your age, I know your gender. In some states, I know your race. I have all sorts of political information, maybe from other groups or campaigns that have contacted you in the past. So I know that somebody from John Kerry's campaign knocked on your door 8 years ago and you told them you weren't interested in voting, or you told them you care about the environment. All of that is in a database somewhere. Maybe, Planned Parenthood knocked on your door, or the NRA too, and that information exists somewhere. And then there's all this information that's been gathered by commercial data warehouses, from magazine subscriptions, the things you put on warranty forms. A lot of it first gathered by people who are creating credit ratings. They obviously want to know as much about you as possible and develop predictions. What's happened in the political world is people are doing statistical models with the same goal. So instead of predicting whether you're likely to default on your loan or pay off your bill on time or run up $500 on your credit card in a given month, they're trying to predict how likely are you to vote in November. Who are you likely to vote for? What issues are you likely to care about?
So give me an example of how I'm being, the politicians might say targeted, but a voter might feel manipulated.
Yeah, so, after they've done these statistical models and are sort of moving you into one of a few categories, you're somebody they want to persuade, you're somebody they want to turn out. The science on turnout has gotten a lot better. We don't know a whole lot more about what makes you change your mind or how you change your mind than we did a decade ago. We know a lot more about what can motivate you to actually cast a ballot. And increasingly, it's informed by behavioral psychology. And so the most effective tool we've ever seen documented was in this experiment in Michigan in 2006, where some political scientists worked with a a pretty quirky mail vendor in Lansing to send voters copies of their own voter history. So this says, in the last 8 elections, you voted in the 2010 general election, you didn't vote in the school board election. And it says, here are your neighbors' vote histories, and has a bunch of people on your block and whether they voted in certain elections. And it said, there's an election coming up. After the election, we're going to send everybody an updated set. It had a sort of astronomical impact compared to any other tool for getting out the vote. It's what psychologists call social pressure. And people have been sort of working with this idea that voters are concerned with sort of their identity around voting time.
In Obama's victory speech, he called Plouffe's campaign the best political campaign in the history of the United States of America. You can watch the full interview here at undergroundusa.com. So if there was any doubt whatsoever that the puppet masters over the past 3+ years have all been apparatchiks from the Obama administration, that doubt should be removed. Obama never left office. He just put on a mask and projected not leaving office onto Donald Trump. Now, if you believe that the polls are way off, and although I don't put much faith in most polling, I only consider Emerson College and Rasmussen polling and glance at the Real Clear Politics polling average, I do believe the polling is decidedly weighted from +6 to +8 towards Democrats, as the internals of most polls today prove. If you believe the polls are way off and that, barring massive voter fraud, a red wave is coming in November, you might want to think again. That's Romney campaign thinking. Donald Trump will have to go into Election Day with a solid 15 to 20 point lead over Harris if his campaign isn't going to be shocked like the Romney campaign was in 2012. And right now, even with the oversampling of Democrats accounted for, Trump's lead is nowhere close. That means 2 things. First, the Trump campaign must pivot from running against the Harris-Walz ticket to running against the Obama 2.0 apparatus, and that means jettisoning the personal attacks and name-calling and instead informing and educating the electorate, and especially his foot soldier supporters, on A, his record, his accomplishments while in office, B, how damaging the Biden-Harris-Obama 2.0 administration has been for everyone in the nation, and C, what our country faces if the transition to Marxism in a Harris-Walz administration becomes reality. Second, it means that the tens of millions of Trump voters must begin, right now, not in 60 or 90 days, to convert voters in the center and on the center left to the Trump campaign. That means engaging in social media groups that aren't part of the Trump echo chamber and actually talking calmly and rationally, using facts and dispensing with any name-calling, to individuals who may not understand the severity of this moment in time. If the far left is going to employ coercive behavioral psychology again, psyops, and with the addition of all the Obamaites, and especially David Plouffe, we know this to be the case, then we who believe in individualism, decentralized government, and a return to constitutionalism for America must engage using verifiable facts and an approach that is less confrontational and more inviting. Watch the words you use, but for the love of baby Jesus, talk, engage, convince. When we come back, our segment on America's Third Watch, broadcast nationally from our flagship station, WGUL AM 860 and FM 93.7 in Tampa, Florida.
You're listening to Underground USA.
Some people won't give you the real talk on drugs, but it's time we know the facts. Fentanyl is often laced into illicit drugs and used to make fake versions of prescription pills. You can't see it, taste it, or smell it. Suppliers mix fentanyl into their products because it's potent and cheap, and the dealer might not even know. Keep yourself and others safe by knowing the real deal on fentanyl. Get the facts. Go to realdealonfentanyl.com.
Ticketmaster's parent company is going woke. They want you to forget about the ridiculous service and convenience fees they charge that nearly double ticket prices. Ticketmaster got caught hacking their competitor to keep customers from getting lower prices. And parent company CEO Michael Rapino laid off workers in droves while raking in millions. It's why Ticketmaster is one of the most hated companies in America. Michael Rapino. Ticketmaster. Serve your customers, not woke politicians.
News, insight, passion. AM 930, The Answer.
So just out of curiosity, what do you think LA can do that will outdo Paris? Do you think will they be sensitive, do you think, now to the possible iconography that would upset so many millions of people?
I think that all depends on what the numbers look like. If the numbers for viewership went down drastically because of what the people in Paris did, then the sponsors will look at the people in LA and say, tone it down, and they'll pivot to something else. But if challenged, I have every confidence that Los Angeles can out LGBTQ plus Paris.
That's right. It's on, basically. And of course we're laughing a little bit, but this is some serious stuff, though. You know, this is a tossing aside of such a large group of people in the population. I think, Frank, they used the term marginalized a lot. There's the whole thing.
You think about it. This is supposed to be an event, the Olympics in total, summer and winter, that is supposed to bring the world together in brotherhood and dispense with all of the maladies of the world. And it has now been weaponized to flip off a majority of the people. So it's turned into a sporting event for the elites and the anointed and the self-important and the arrogant. Mm-hmm. So if the Olympics want to get back to the spirit of the Olympics, and, we were talking about that after the Paris thing, the spirit of the Olympics is to bring people together, not to divide them, then you knock it off with the controversial stuff and make it about the sports.
Well, exactly. And hopefully in LA, they won't have the cardboard beds. And I know it's kind of silly, but it just seems to me that they constantly try to make this some kind of microcosm, an experimental workplace or something for what they want. Everybody should have a cardboard bed, I guess. That may be the messaging.
I think Gavin Newsom got rid of the homeless people out in California so that the Olympians can use the streets.
I think you're right. Well, Frank, again, we're looking forward to a great week here, obviously. But one of the things about Kamala Harris is that obviously she's not sitting down with anybody to do an interview anytime soon. Michael Steele over on MSNBC is saying she doesn't have to because she's just talking to the American people and doesn't need the imprimatur of the press. I mean, they're trying to explain everything away at this point.
And she's not standing up to do interviews either. Michael Steele has proved himself over the years to be a massive idiot. She's not even talking to the public. She's not talking to anybody. She's not doing a full frontal assault on social media. She's not doing interviews. She's not even making YouTube. She's not doing anything. The only thing she's doing is going to, and this was just the bizarrest thing that I read, that she went to an invitation-only, vetted, private campaign rally. How do you have an invitation-only, vetted campaign rally? That's like saying, okay, well, I'm going to say some controversial things, and I want to get my message out there, but I'm going to pick the 5 people I'm going to talk to.
Yeah. Well, this is just more evidence that she has to be the figurehead, and, so they have to tightly control all this, and they can't let her just go off script.
I think it's abundantly obvious that their game plan is, let's keep her out of sight all the way up to the election if we possibly can, and hope that Donald Trump says something that we can hang the hat on to destroy him. Because they're not going to let her out. They believe that the basement thing worked for Joe Biden. So if they do it again, it'll work for Kamala Harris. And quite honestly, they may be right with a media that's running the way they are for her. Look what happened with the polls. The sycophantic media is just vomiting Kamala Harris everywhere. So, there's got to be a snapping point, and the Trump administration has to take a page from Lee Atwater's book. They need to run commercials that define Kamala Harris and do it without calling names. They need to point to her record. They need to spotlight her record, and they need to let her words define her for the American people, because nobody knows who Kamala Harris is. That's how inconsequential she has been.
Yeah. Speaking of Tim Walz, there was someone who's actually a command sergeant major who said that Tim Walz, and he's retired, he said Tim Walz knew months in advance that his unit would be deploying, giving him ample time to decide to retire, I suppose. But again, he left his unit high and dry, from what we understand.
Yeah, he left days before he was supposed to deploy.
Right.
There's so much wrong with the Tim Walz biography, going all the way down to when he said he was the coach of a state championship football team. It wasn't. He didn't. This guy is an embellishment. That's his entire biography is an embellishment. Obviously the most egregious is the stolen valor. And I said this last time we talked, and I need to say it again. There are laws on the books about stolen valor that need to be enforced here. If they're going to go after Donald Trump for documents, if they're going to go after him for non-crimes in New York, if they're going to go after him for non-crimes in alleging election interference in Atlanta, then they have to go after Tim Walz for stolen valor, because he did commit that crime. Otherwise, they're admitting point blank right to our faces that we'll prosecute a Republican, but we won't prosecute a Democrat.
Oh, sure. Well, some are saying, well, he misspoke. I don't care. That was just a misspeaking that happened.
I don't care. I don't care if it's just a miss. It can't be misspoke when he said it over and over and
That's
over
right.
and over again.
Oh, yeah. Put in your campaign literature. I mean, you name it. This guy was trying to create the illusion that he had some special perspective on the Second Amendment because he carried weapons into war. And Frank, I don't know the last time, does the military carry the AR-15 into war?
I don't believe they use AR-15s.
No.
M16s perhaps, but not AR-15s. We have to draw a line as a society. The political sphere, it has gotten so commonplace to embellish and lie in the political sphere, and this goes for both sides of the aisle. I'm not singling out Harris and Walz for this. I condemn the whole spectrum of politicians for this. We cannot accept the way that they just casually lie and embellish almost 100% of the time. Mm-hmm. It's a big part of why people don't know who they're voting for or what they're voting for, because we've become tolerant of, well, that's just politics. Well, that's just a politician. You can't listen to anything a politician says. Well, then I guess truth matters.
Mm-hmm.
And it's time we start demanding the truth. If somebody's going to come out like Harris and bald-faced lie about her record, and Tim Walz and bald-faced lie about their records, they must be held accountable for lying to us, for thinking so little about the American people that it doesn't matter if we tell them the truth. I'll just say what I want to say so I can get elected. Very Alinsky, very Marxist, very ends justifies the means. And we've got to get away from that. Our society has been poisoned by that.
Well, indeed. And, as well, Frank, Donna Brazil was on one of the Sunday shows, and she was saying, we got to get away. Kamala can't be boxed in by these old metaphors of left and right. I saw that, and I just roared with laughter. I mean, what the heck is she smoking over there?
Why Donna Brazil is still being asked her opinion after proving herself to be A, untrustworthy, and B, a blatant liar is beyond the pale. What she did, not only to the American people, but to the Democrats in making sure that Hillary Clinton got questions to subvert the candidacy of Bernie Sanders. And I'm not a Bernie Sanders fan, but you have to have even playing fields. What Donna Brazil did was tantamount to a crime against the American people.
Mm-hmm.
So why am I listening to her? Why does she have a platform?
Well, I agree completely. But it is interesting that, again, they want Kamala Harris to be, to at least to people who don't really know who she is, to be a blank slate. Somehow that she's moderate, she's not against fracking, stuff like that. But she's been like this forever. And she hasn't evolved in the last 20 days that much.
No, she hasn't. And she's vicious when it comes to elections. When it comes to performing the job that she's running for, she's dismal. That's why her actual record paints her as an ultra leftist San Francisco Bay politico. She makes Nancy Pelosi look moderate.
Yeah, right.
And that's just a fact. When you start looking at Kamala Harris's record, she was horrible in every position that she held, and she was always using it as a springboard to something better. So she never really wanted the jobs she ran for. She knew she had to run that labyrinth in order to get where she wanted to go. But in elections, she's a vicious, xenophobic partisan, and that applies to her own party as well. She can't be trusted to tell the truth. She'll say anything to get elected. And if you look at her staff turnover, 92%.
Yeah.
A 92% staff turnover. That's award-winning.
Yeah, right. And if it was, let's just say that was Donald Trump, it would be, you see, nobody can work for this guy. He's terrible, and this kind of stuff. But how does Trump handle her viciousness, as it were, in the debate, let's say, in terms of how hard she's going to go at Donald Trump?
Record, and I'm going to say record. He doesn't call her names. He doesn't call her cackling Kamala. He doesn't roll his eyes at her. He stays presidential, and he stays intellectually superior. And every time she opens her mouth, he just drops another nugget of what her record is on the issues. And quite honestly, but aside from doing that, he has to make this election about the leftist regime that is Obama 2.0, that has been pulling the strings since Obama got to Washington and through the Biden administration. If he runs against the regime instead of running against the person and says, we've got to get back to to a time when Marxists didn't run the government. It hasn't served you. Look at your 401k. Look at the prices of everything. Look at how divided our country is. That didn't happen under my watch. It happened because of the way they push back against everything that I stand for and every policy that I put in. Every regulation I got rid of, they opposed. Everything that I did, they oppose and did it with a viciousness that has divided the country. It's time we get back to a semblance of, you want normalcy? You want to get back to normal? You want to get rid of the new normal? We got to get rid of this whole regime that was unleashed on the American people at the beginning of the Obama administration.
Yeah, very well said. And Frank, I think, again, coming back to the record, I think you are 100% on target with that. You know, there's a lot of politics, obviously, we can talk about, but we also continue to see, now this time last week, Frank, you know, we were anticipating an attack from Iran against Israel. It's been a week now, basically, but now the Israeli defense minister is saying that he spoke to Lloyd Austin, our defense secretary, on Sunday, and said Iran's military is going to launch what they believe is a large-scale attack. And then we have a related story where Lloyd Austin is sending a submarine to that area, but also telling the Abraham Lincoln Carrier battle group to go there faster. So, I mean, this is where we're at right now.
Well, you know, I'm always somebody who says wait and see and verify. You know, it's that old Reagan thing, trust but verify. I tend to trust the Israeli intelligence a little bit more at this point than I do the intelligence coming out of the Pentagon and Lloyd Austin's regime over there. Mm-hmm. I'm glad to see that we're sending a nuclear sub and an aircraft carrier, but unless we're getting ready to enter that conflict, you know, and we're getting into an election here. Mm-hmm. So, you know, if they feel that Kamala Harris is that weak a candidate, this would be something that the Biden administration would do to help her by getting involved in a conflict so that you have a different news cycle. I know that sounds superficial and a little bit outrageous, but it's the wag the dog strategy.
Right. Oh, no, I think you're right on track with that, because, again, I mean, they're playing this for all the marbles, and I don't think that they really care too much about who they drag into it for that.
They couldn't care less. Now, not to make it sound duplicitous, but this action helps Israel because it projects a message to Iran that, you know what, they do back us. All of the stuff that you've been hearing that they don't is all BS, so watch what you do. But Iran is another one that's duplicitous. I mean, there's so many bizarre mind games happening here that you need a scorecard to keep them all figured out. Iran saber rattles all the time. Meanwhile, they just make sure they keep funding Hamas and Hezbollah because those are their proxy armies. So, you know, like we said on Friday, their offensive started on October 7th, mm-hmm. and it hasn't stopped. And it's only escalated because Hezbollah has joined in. So Iran's already engaged with Israel. They're just using their proxies. You know, whether the Iranian army gets involved, that would be a major escalation. Would we go tit for tat with them, knowing that China and Russia both back Iran?
Right.
Would we do the World War III thing? Well, there's an election coming up. You know, and like I said, when your back's against the wall, if you think you're going to lose, the way many people are saying Kamala Harris is going to get smeared all over the windshield of politics, then yeah, you would.
Well, you know, some are saying, Frank, that somehow the one issue is going to be abortion, and that's going to be the thing that decides this whole presidential race. Do you give it that much weight, or I mean, it's a component, and it's a large component, but is it the component, do you think?
No, I don't think it's as big as the media wants you to believe it's going to be, because the numbers aren't there. Since Roe v. Wade, the number of abortions have increased, not decreased. They have increased. So this idea that overturning a law that federalized something when it should have stayed with the states, 50 separate states, 50 separate constitutions, 50 separate social laboratories. That's the way our country was supposed to be. You know, now you've got very, very liberal abortion laws in California, Illinois, New York, and most of the Northeast. And you have more conservative abortion laws in states that aren't glow-in-the-dark blue. So no one is saying that you can't get one. They're just saying, you know, if you're going to spend money on a vacation to go see the mouse in Florida, but you've gotten yourself pregnant because you didn't use one of the 10 billion birth control options out there, then maybe you need to spend your vacation money going someplace to do what you think you need to do. But it's not illegal. Mm-hmm. So and Trump's stance was Ruth Bader Ginsburg's stance, and he's pointed that out several times. So what are you going to do? Call Ruth Bader Ginsburg a conservative shill?
Right. Well, of course, part of the Harris sort of mentality on this is they got to make it a national thing. It's going to be enshrined in a national way, either through a constitutional amendment or through legislation in some way. But really what the Democrat Party elite, the far left, what they want is the 50 states to be 50 vassal states and not just be the 50 states.
And there's your strategy if you're the Trump campaign. They want to federalize everything.
Yeah.
They want a centralized government so that they can put into place a centralized plan for everybody. That is communism. The reason we have 50 separate states with 50 separate constitutions is because we don't want centralized federal government. The fact that they have inserted themselves into every aspect of our lives, that was never supposed to be, and the states were supposed to be able to push back because the senators were supposed to be appointed from the state legislators. They weren't supposed to be federally elected. They were supposed to be appointed to protect the rights of the states. When the amendment was passed that made them directly elected, we lost protection for the state constitutions, and that was a big step towards centralizing the government in Washington, D.C. The federal government's very important. The Constitution says that they are vested with certain things that they must perform on. But they have expanded so far into what the state's purview should be, mm-hmm. that our country doesn't resemble what our framers gave us. So we need to decentralize government, not amass more power at the federal level. So once again, Trump shouldn't be saying, let's talk about the abortion issue. But let's talk about it in the context with, do we want more centralized government, or do we want decentralized government so it's easier to get rid of the bad people who find their way to office?
Wow. Absolutely 100% right. And, you know, Frank, that's why I really appreciate our conversations and having you on the program.
If you like the podcast, please rate it and comment if your platform lets you. Go over to undergroundusa.com and subscribe to the Substack, and pick up your copy of Nullification, available on Amazon. But more importantly, talk to your friends, family, colleagues, and acquaintances about politics and religion. Do it calmly and employ facts over emotion. You'll be surprised how much you have in common with a great many of those you talk to. It's something we can all do to preserve the Republic. My name is Frank Salvato, and you're listening to Underground USA.
When someone is having a stroke, every minute counts. Just as putting out a fire quickly can stop it from spreading, treating a stroke quickly can reduce damage to the brain. The clock begins ticking as soon as you spot the signs of a stroke, because some treatments can only be used if the patient reaches the hospital in the first 3 hours after symptoms appear. So don't wait. Call 911 right away and get the person to a hospital immediately, even if the symptoms go away. If you think someone is having a stroke, remember the word FAST. F is for face. Ask the person to smile and check whether one side of their face is drooping. A is for arms. Have the person raise both arms and see if one arm drifts downwards. S is for speech. Ask the person to repeat a short phrase and notice if their words sound slurred. And finally, T is for time. If you spot any of these signs, call 911 right away to get the person to a hospital fast. Strokes are medical emergencies. The sooner a patient gets treatment, the better their chance of a good recovery.